Hi everyone, my name's Jonathan. I'm one of the tax managers here at Fullstack Advisory. Joining me today is Ian from Avertro. Thank you, Ian, for joining me. And thank you everyone else as well for listening, for joining us today and listening into this recording if you are. So today we're going to be discussing cybersecurity, what it is, why is it important, what are the things to be aware of, and how to better protect ourselves online. Really, most activities these days are done online. Have a look at this webinar. There's almost no limits as well as to what we can do online. We can order dinner, we can sort that out online. You can even do grocery shopping. A lot of people are opting in to do that, especially with COVID lockdowns. More people are doing things online, chatting with friends, interacting with hundreds of people, live feeds, playing games, online banking, just about anything that doesn't require physical interaction can be done online these days. And it spans across different faculties of the things that we do: social, business, finances, everything. As this allows us enhanced ways of how we do things, it does mean that we potentially can be more susceptible to cyber crimes and cyber attacks. So hopefully today's session provides some insight and maybe some steps that can be taken to avoid becoming hacked, having your information compromised. Okay, so just a quick disclaimer, the content of today's presentation is general in nature. It's all for educational purposes, and anything we discuss may not relate specifically to your situation. So we always advise to seek out your own advice, be it tax, legal, cybersecurity, or otherwise. It's really important to speak to a professional and get a good, sound understanding of your particular situation. If you'd like to contact us regarding any of the things that we discussed today, there'll be a contact us page at the end for Fullstacks and Avertro as well. So a little bit about Fullstacks. So we're a chartered accounting firm. We do specialize in crypto. We do a whole lot of other stuff as well. We provide a wide range of services. Some of the common ones that we provide for the crypto community include compliance, advisory, VCF, even R&D, bookkeeping, and a lot more. We do work regularly with investors, for traders, investors, mum and dad investors, people doing trades at the breakfast table, and people that make a living out of doing it. We work with miners, gaming enthusiasts, crypto businesses. We work with decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs, and we also work with and for centralized exchanges as well. So our focus is on providing practical services and advice to the crypto clients, and that typically means a hands-on approach where we work closely with you and assisting you through your various tax implications as it relates to your affairs, and looking at ways to remain compliant every step of the way.
Yep. So yes, my name is Ian Yip. I'm the founder and CEO of Avertro. We are a cybersecurity SaaS company. I won't read all that out, but ultimately our mission is to democratize cybersecurity decision-making. Our customers tend to be mid to large-sized companies, most of whom you would have heard of, but for obviously sensitivity reasons, we don't generally name them. I've personally been in cybersecurity for many years across the world and working for a lot of mid to large-size cybersecurity providers, both in the software and solution space.
Cool. All right, so just some housekeeping items. So obviously being an open discussion style session, we encourage the audience to participate. So if you have any queries or any commentary, anything like that throughout today's session, just pop it into the chat window and I'll do my best to get to it. And like I mentioned earlier, today's session's being recorded. So again, if you can't stick around, you have other things to attend to, school pickups and whatnot, yeah, feel free to refer to the recording once it's published. So today's agenda, the items that we're going to be looking at, in particular, is exactly what is cybercrime, the different types of cybercrime, how do cyber criminals target cryptocurrency particularly, how do we protect ourselves online and offline, and if you have fallen victim to a cyber attack where you've had cryptocurrency that's become lost or stolen, what tax remedies are available for us? So starting off with what is cybercrime. So the AFP has done a lovely job at defining this for us, and it's basically crimes detected at the computer level or other information communication technologies, such as computer intrusions and denial of service attacks, or crimes where computers have been an integral part of the offense. Cybersecurity is a worldwide matter and a growing industry as well, unfortunately. So there was a recent publication from a foreign publisher that conducted research into cybersecurity and looked at some trends. And there's actually an upwards trend in the need for cybersecurity with an anticipated 140% increase in a 7-year period. So this tells me that the forecast is in line with the increase in cyber-related crimes and also a growing need for users to ensure that they're secure when engaging online. I assume the growth in cyber-related crime is due to the new digital age of doing everything online, no doubt. But Ian, do you know why, or do you think why there is a particular growth in cyber-related activities, criminal activities?
I mean, ultimately, it's because of how much it's worth. So cybercrime, in terms of a cost globally, based on one of the key studies, is actually worth 6 trillion currently, on target to hit 10 trillion by 2025. So to give you some perspective, if you measure cybercrime alone as a country, cybercrime would be the world's 3rd largest economy behind the US and China. So it's very profitable.
That's quite disturbing.
Yeah. So if you project it out to 2025, cybercrime will be exponentially larger, and the damage we expect that will be inflicted from natural disasters per year, and more profitable than the global trade of all major illegal drugs combined. So the trend is upwards. It is very profitable. The flip side is it doesn't cost you very much to be a cyber criminal. Some studies have shown that you can be a cyber criminal for as little as $20 a month, meaning you don't necessarily need to have the expertise. You can hire cybercrime as a service from the dark web, from anywhere from $20 a month for some SMS spoofing. Custom spyware costs $200, I think, for each thing. You can hire a hacker for about $200 an hour. And then obviously there are more complicated things that cost a little bit more money. But I think the key there is the barrier to entry is no longer as high as most people expect. And if you look at some of the numbers on how much cyber criminals can earn, it's somewhere between $40K a year to $2 million a year.
Wow.
It's the dollars speak volumes, and it drives a lot of behavior, and it's why its tick is exponentially growing day by day.
I thought that $20 a month would have just been like them paying for internet or something.
Yeah, paying for internet costs more than
that's actually that $20 is getting you a professional criminal that can assist you with illicit activities. That
pays all of us to get fake SMS messages for all sorts of scams. That's called SMS spoofing. Or spoofing to a certain extent is also pretending to be somebody else's mobile, so they can pretend to be somebody else that they're not. SMS related cybercrime as a service, that's the easiest way to try and get at somebody. And that's the cheapest form of cybercrime as a service.
And it's not even like this is one of those dodgy text messages. You can accidentally click into it. Like I've got a daughter who's just over 2 years old, and she's regularly on my phone. Who's to say that she doesn't accidentally open up a message that pops up and then clicks into the link unknowingly? And then I have no idea. And I check my bank account and there's nothing in there. It's just a picture of a moth or a gotcha, and I don't mean to sound insensitive to this situation, because it does definitely happen. So hopefully this is not too triggering for people, but it's important that we talk about it. But with the people that send out those text messages all the time, how are they even getting our phone numbers to begin with?
Our phone numbers are basically public information at this point. You just need to
right.
It's not hard to find someone's phone number. Email addresses are even easier to derive and find. It's not even an underground thing. Some marketing aspects use our emails, not necessarily in an illegal way, but they derive it in a way to be able to communicate with us. But just breaches all over the place, happening multiple times daily. Most times our phone numbers are in those things.
Is it something that we're growing more desensitized to, like as new generations come into the picture and become like key decision makers in society? Is it the older generations that are maybe more prudent to doing things online and giving out information as opposed to the younger generation? And who's not to say that other information that we have, other personal information, then becomes almost public knowledge, like our mobile phone numbers are?
There is a danger in being desensitized, especially when it's front page news every single day. The interesting thing is, I think I've seen some studies actually say it's the younger people in the world that are actually more sensitive to privacy.
Okay, good.
older folks. So that there's a glimmer of hope, I think, where, and ultimately what the kind of behavior we want to drive is that consumers should demand that the services they use treat their data with respect. And if the generation demands that, then it will drive better behavior when it comes to building apps and keeping people's information private and so on. And I think it comes from them being more digitally savvy. And in the more developed parts of the world, we were talking about kids earlier, a lot of the schools now have cyber safety training and messaging, just basic stuff, but from kindergarten onwards, to try and ensure that our kids from that age are aware of some of the more unseemly parts of the internet from a criminal standpoint, and also hopefully discouraging or reducing the risk of things like you were mentioning, where your kid might click on a link in your browser or your SMS or whatever else. If they're properly educated, and doesn't mean it won't happen, just means there's hopefully they know what not to do at an earlier age than when we were that age.
Yeah, education is definitely key, and as long as we're ensuring that people are aware of the issue, especially kids, then that's going to allow for us to be more prudent with how we conduct affairs online. And I suppose you're right as well, like older generation, they might be more naive. Like how many instances have you heard of or read it in the news about an old lady, for example, receiving a call and then giving out her bank details because supposedly the government wants it, or the ATO wants it, or Centrelink want it, or what else? Yeah, that's definitely very important. All right, so the different types of ways that cybers can target cryptocurrency. Oh, sorry, the different types of crime, should I say. What do you find are the most common types that you see in your line of work? Or that you read about as well?
Yeah, it depends on the audience. Obviously, in the business sphere, it tends to come down to fraud or so whaling attacks or business email compromise. Very often it's you hear about this all the time, I'm sure if you read about it, it's the attacker changing the bank account details of the invoice being paid. That comes up all the time. It's trying to trick the really senior executive into clicking on the thing so that the access. Yeah. There's the trying to pretend to be the senior exec and asking somebody who reports into them to do a financial transaction that it means they transfer the money to the criminal. So that's what we see a lot in the business world. From a consumer standpoint, it's mostly just trying to get access to your personal details, and mostly fraud around things like credit cards and so on. It's more harder for them to get your bank account, thankfully. So we don't see it as often. It's mostly the things, but it's almost always financially motivated.
Yeah. So I remember doing some cybersecurity training a few years ago, and before the consultant came in for a presentation, there was an exercise that they conducted. And one of it was to send an email out to everyone at the firm. And it was something along the lines of, "Hi, Jonathan, it's such and such here. I'm currently out of office at the moment, but can you please process this payment immediately for this client? The client's asking for a process payment to this particular account." And you hear that and you're like, what the hell? I don't do that. But there might be particular staff members whose responsibility it is to handle that, such as accounts payable staff or accounts admin and whatnot. They might look at that and they're just trying to chop through as many emails as they can, get everything done. They might be on a rush to get to lunch. It only takes one instance where that's done, and then all of a sudden there's a breach. Right. Another sort of funny thing that they did was that they literally just wandered around the office like this complete stranger, like obviously doesn't work in the firm. And during the presentation, they actually said, they're like, "Oh, well, how many of you actually noticed me walking around the office?" They're like, "Yeah, I saw you looked familiar. I was wondering where I saw you from." And he's like, "Okay, that's in itself a breach. And which one of you has actually said something and reported it to a manager or the partner or anyone like that?" No one did.
Yeah, part of physical pen test where, they try and tailgate, they try and get into the sites. It's because of human nature, and we don't necessarily want to be a troublemaker if we're nice people. So you don't normally get challenged. See, on that point we were just talking about earlier in terms of ask someone who works in a team to do something. One thing that I was also starting to see is you probably get the SMSs too, right? Where you get an SMS that says, "Hi, mom and dad," or whatever. "I've lost my phone. I need $50. Here's my account. Please transfer it to me quickly." That's emergent. It relies on the same rationale and thinking as that executive asking the finance manager or something to transfer this to this new client or something, right? It's the
Yeah, it
same.
needs to be done immediately. Act as soon as possible. You don't think it only gets the right person in the right conditions for that to actually go through. Yeah, that's crazy. So there is a different sort of demographic that criminals sort of target. So on businesses, it's more so on that end. But what about, is it different for countries? Is it different for if you're using an online store, checking out online stores? You go to your cart, you check out, you pay for it. If you're doing online banking and transfers, should that be done on the mobile phone instead? Should you avoid using those websites at all?
The form factor isn't really the main thing. It's your mobile isn't necessarily more secure than your laptop and vice versa. There's probably, if you look at the statistics, certain operating systems have less threats and vulnerabilities than others. That's mainly a function of criminals optimizing for what the majority of the world has. And if I want to point out, the majority of the world runs with Windows. So if you look at the stats, what most of the malware targets, it's Windows. So that's why those things come up. The thing I'll give Apple credit for is that they deliberately make their operating systems a little bit more closed. So it's not that there's no malware, there's still malware for Apple devices and phones and laptops. But because less people have them and Apple makes it a little harder to put malware into their ecosystem, then your risk is lower. Doesn't mean it goes away. In terms of the website, more commonly, you'll see malicious stuff injected into the websites. So e-commerce sites are quite commonly, if they're not properly secured, right? A lot of times, very specifically, e-commerce sites very commonly use content management systems, CMSs. So there's a lot of times you'll see a vulnerability come out where there's a vulnerability targeted for a set of CMSs. And if you don't patch your CMS that's backing your e-commerce site, for example, then an attacker could basically run an attack and inject some malicious thing into your site. And your unwitting customers could become a victim of that cyber criminal. So that's one aspect. And then the hardest one to do, which is not impossible, is to get actually into the network and change certain parts of, we were talking about this earlier, where I know for a fact there was a very trusted brand in Australia that I can't name a week ago. It was only up for half an hour and it wasn't publicly reported, but their website was hosting something that looked like a gambling kind of webpage for about half an hour before it was taken down, because I think someone responsibly disclosed it to them. And that kind of stuff happens if you don't protect your network properly, because that was literally, if you went to secure dot and then the domain of that actual company, you hit this website. And if you don't know anybody, you thought you might trust it because it's on the right domain, it's got right certificates, etc. That kind of stuff is, I'm not trying to say scare everybody, but that kind of stuff is reality, is what happens.
Yeah, I think the main thing that people would look at when visiting a trusted site is whether or not the domain actually checks out, right? So a lot of times you will see the domain name be slightly different than the actual genuine domain. So to see the domain name actually being used in the correct manner, but then it's a different link to that, is that's quite scary.
In this case, it was literally on that company's website infrastructure. So it was actually compromised inside their network. It wasn't somebody trying to pretend to be them, which the more common case you were alluding to there is, you change one letter. It's actually something else and it looks like it, but if you didn't look closely, you won't notice. But the case I was talking about was an actual proper security incident.
Yeah, that's scary. And that doesn't get reported unless there's a breach, because there's no requirement for them to report instances of potential breaches. They only have requirements to disclose that information to the public and customers if there is a genuine breach. So the cybersecurity community was able to pick it up before something actually happened and notify the business accordingly, so then they could take the preventative measures, which thankfully didn't lead to an incident. But yeah, those are the things that we don't see, that we're not told about. Most of us will be aware of the Optus data breach, and that saw 10,000 affected customers. And there was 100 points of ID stolen for those customers as well. So that's quite damaging to not only Optus, but our confidence in large corporate and large businesses to be able to keep our data secure. Like, how much confidence should we actually have in these businesses in doing the right thing? Or is there things that we can do in addition to protect ourselves? Because it seems like we're at the mercy of these large corporates.
I think the time will tell. I think one thing the security industry has been hopeful of is that companies start to take security more seriously because there is a real business impact of them not doing it. And I think some of the incidents we've seen over the last 2 months will be the litmus test as to whether people vote with their feet. So you got to ask yourself the question, does lack of trust in a company's cybersecurity prevent your thinking process in terms of you wanting to be their customer? I'd argue it obviously didn't do the brands that we're talking about any good. I personally wouldn't do business with either of those brands but I'm in security, right? So I'm probably more sensitive to it. The real question will be, okay, if you're a person who's not in cybersecurity, has what happened changed your behavior? Will you willingly become a customer of either of those companies in question again? Will you forget about it in 6 months? Those are the questions we have to ask. And I think if these companies, look, obviously the share prices dropped. That's normally a given. The question there is, will the share price recover? And secondarily, will they see a significant drop in new customers over the next 6 to 12 months? And can they tie it back to incidents? And if they can, then that's a signal to business that what consumers are actually caring about this stuff nowadays. You better be serious versus, oh, they've forgotten about it. We can just go back to what we used to do.
Yeah, I think the main difference there is actually having an understanding about security and having that background. And if you don't have that background, to have a good, strong foundation understanding of this particular breach and what's actually required to prevent something like that from happening. So whilst you've said that you almost definitely won't do business with these people ever again, or in the immediate short term, whilst other people potentially will, I'm sure Optus still has plenty of customers walking through their doors, getting phones and plans and all those sort of things and giving out details. But they might not have this understanding that maybe they didn't read about it, maybe they didn't see it on the news, or maybe they just don't have a detailed understanding of the whole sort of cybersecurity and crime space to put enough consideration on it, because it doesn't seem like that. And not to bash Optus around too much, but maybe some people are just naive. Maybe people just think, oh, it's not going to happen to me until it does. And then it's obviously preventive measures will likely be undertaken at that point. So it doesn't seem to me like this is like a once-off. Might be a once-off thing for Optus. It's like, you fooled us once, shame on you, but you're not going to fool us twice and it's going to be shame on us. They're probably, if you look at the financials, maybe you see a significant increase in cybersecurity consultants or consultant fees in that regard. But how can businesses ensure that they protect themselves and their customers and their data? Is there things that they can do to prevent that unwanted access?
Ultimately, it's a risk management exercise.
How can businesses prevent this from happening? Is there something that could have been in place to prevent it?
There's no 100% security. That's the first thing we have to admit. It's a risk management exercise, and every business, no matter how big or small, needs to conduct a risk management exercise for every business risk, right? Financial risk, cyber risk, you're managing a whole bunch of operational risk as well, etc. So I think all we're saying is cyber risk is now a major business level risk for your directors, for your leadership. And it's just, you just have to manage the same way, meaning you don't need to put every single piece of tech under the sun. You don't need to hire every single consultant out there. Just, it's a risk management exercise. What are the most important things you're trying to protect, and protect those things. And there are certain things that you can probably not necessarily spend as much money protecting. And in security, we call them crown jewels. Identify, protecting. For the most part, it's data, it's IP. So how are you putting relevant, we call them controls to reduce that risk? The analogy I often use is, everybody now understands COVID, right? Before COVID, we didn't understand pandemics, but COVID is a risk management exercise. Every time we go out, we are managing risk. We're managing the risk of catching COVID. And the controls we put in place to reduce the risk of catching COVID are things like using hand sanitizer, or wiping surfaces down, or putting a mask on. So exactly. So do you want to wear a mask on the public transport or not? If you don't wear it, your risk of catching COVID is higher, but if you're willing to accept the risk, don't wear the mask. Same thing with cybersecurity. If you don't want to wear a mask, understand the risk you're exposing yourself to.
I remember when I was in university, and we would study these things, and there'd be like environmental risks and other associated risks and threats and weaknesses and things like that of competition and products becoming obsolete or technology becoming obsolete. I don't recall there being much emphasis at all. And mind you, this is some time ago, but I do not recall any emphasis on cyber security or crime, how secure your IT infrastructure actually is, like physical and soft infrastructure. So I'm glad to see that there's being a shift made in that regard, because it's quite evident that it is very damaging to the business, its customers. So there's an actual profitability perspective there with the breach like this and impacting share prices, customer retention, new customers, conversions, but also from the ethical standpoint as well. So it's obviously very important. So in particular, how do criminals target crypto? Some of the common ways that I can see is that they'll use things like ransom software, malware, phishing links. Another interesting one that we spoke about before the webinar was cryptojacking, where, and again, apologies if this sounds a bit light on the matter, and if you are listening to this recording or attending today's session and you've fallen victim to any one of these attacks. But cryptojacking is the event of being installed onto your system, unbeknownst to you, that uses your computing processing abilities to be able to generate crypto and to mine crypto. That's crazy. And Ian, we're talking about an instance where there was a known business that was actually doing this, but offered it as a service of a profit sharing deal with its customers. And they're in security. They're in online security.
Correct. We won't mention it because it's been recorded. You can Google this if you're listening, but yes, there was a very well-known security company that released a version of their software at one point and said, oh, by the way, this one has crypto mining capabilities. If you check the tick box, we will share the profits that anything it mines with you. But yeah, ultimately it was very hypocritical of them because they're basically using malware of sorts to be deployed with the thing that's supposed to protect you against the malware. They've since removed, I believe, because of all the blowback and fallout from doing that. But yeah, you sometimes wonder who makes these decisions.
Yeah, who's at the top there saying, look, guys, I got a good idea. This is what we should be doing. And then that is absolutely insane. So like with ransom software, malware, and phishing links, like what exactly do they do? Like how exactly bad are they?
So the reason we say normally the first step for any sort of attack is phishing. So they try and get you to click on something because that forces you to act. The minute you act, you can let some software run ultimately. So the advice generally is don't click on something. We know it's not realistic to say don't click on everything. My advice usually is if you don't click on it, be 100% sure it's going to go somewhere that you trust. If you don't know where that link is going to go, don't click the link. But ultimately, the reason that works is because if you click on the link, it'll send you to a place that will probably have a piece of malware on there. And in the act of going to that site or that location, it will download the malware to your device. And it will know what you have. And then once the malware is on there, it's a free-for-all because they probably have full access because most of us have admin access to our machines. And admin access means you can want to the machine, including spy on what you're typing or listen to you or watch what you're clicking or look at your what you type into your crypto wallets as a password or a passkey and do anything
that's crazy. And I'm sure that you only have to think about this carefully. If you're monitoring computer activity just by what's being typed into a keyboard, what do you think you're going to do when you log into a website? You're going to put in your username, which might be an email address. And then what follows that, typically the password. So I don't think it's too difficult they quite clearly show that's obviously not a difficult thing to be able to identify. So that's terrible. So preventative measures is mainly be damn sure that you know exactly what link you're clicking into actually is, and if the sender of that link is a genuine sender. So is there software that we can install or use to verify a sender, or is it worth Googling a sender you're not sure of or something like that?
Ultimately, so the email system actually has mechanisms in it to help you figure out if the sender is trusted.
Okay.
The more well-known ones, Microsoft and Google, I think their native clients will actually tell you whether the email is coming from a trusted source. If they've configured it properly, it will. It's also good to find spammers. If someone's spamming you, it's probably not going to have a very good reputation. But as far as links are concerned, a lot of the good antivirus or endpoint protection types of software will also have browser plugins that, now it won't catch 100% of them, but it will catch some nefarious links that you're being sent to and literally block you saying, are you sure you want to go here? This doesn't look very secure. And you've got to actually actively say, yes, I want to go here, or you might go, hang on a minute, maybe not. There are pieces of tech you can install. Some are free, some cost money, but the cheapest way to do it is, to be a little bit savvy in terms of your behavior. The other thing I should probably mention is we talk about keystroking and username passwords. It's also why we always advocate for multi-factor authentication or second factor authentication, because the one thing they can't
takes it
keystroke
offline
is your second factor, because it's on a different device and it changes everything. So that's a little bit of extra protection for, even if there's a piece of malware watching every keystroke, if you've got a second factor, they probably still can't get in.
Yeah. And it's crazy to see that there's some cryptocurrency hard wallets that don't have that security feature incorporated into the app. Like I can name quite a few that are probably more susceptible than others, and you likely know which ones they are. It's very important as a security protocol and feature. It's similar to like how cold storage wallets work, right? You have to have another device handy to be able to process a transaction or to be able to continue your activities. And it's the act of preventing the access in the first instance. So that's probably the best form of defense that you can potentially have. That's available. That's widely available to most people.
Yeah. So in security, we basically just talk about layer defense. Just layer as many protections as you can, and it would reduce the risk of being done. Yeah.
Put the Kevlar vest on and probably not going to suffer severe wounds. Yeah, that's definitely good advice. All right. So look, protecting yourself online, no one wants to be a victim to a cyber criminal. It can be very distressing. I'm sure many of us know someone that this has happened to, or may have even happened to yourself. You don't know what's happened, when it's happened, who it is, what they've taken. You don't know what they have, what capabilities they have now that you've identified a breach, whether it's going to happen again. Some preventative measures that I see used in crypto that most people are probably aware of is using a cold storage device. Some people might limit online usage, for instance, only go in onto sites when they absolutely have to, or get out of visiting trusted websites as well. So back to those phishing links, for example, it's very easy to click into those. And some instances, those links actually require you to connect the wallet. So it's pretending to be a particular protocol that it's not, or a particular website that it's not. Connect your wallet to it, and then it's compromised. Unfortunately, that's something that regularly happens. The amount of instances where cryptocurrency has been lost or stolen that's been reported to our office that we have to deal with and assist clients with is quite high, and it continues to increase by the looks of it. Yeah, maybe just avoid typing in the links or clicking links. Maybe just, would you recommend bookmarking a page for frequently visited sites, especially if the risk you think is quite high? Like you don't have to bookmark like YouTube or something like that and make sure that's put in correctly. But if you're going to visit an exchange or a particular D app, you'd probably want to make sure that you've bookmarked that correctly, so there's no room for human error, or you're mitigating the instance of human error.
Yeah, beyond that, there are also bits of software. We call them, I think nowadays we call them allow listing, whether it's a trusted app to run or a trusted site. You can sometimes just say, these are the things I trust, anything else, tell me. So it's a short.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Right. Yeah.
So this is like that's an additional layer of defense that what you were talking about before, where it's just like you want to build these layers to prevent the instance of you just doing something just unbeknownst to yourself at the time, and just a tap on the shoulder to say, hey, look, you might want to double check this because this doesn't recognize as a trusted site.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, security there's always some friction between usability and security. Generally, the more security you put in, the more you sacrifice in terms of usability, because you're just introducing friction. So I think you've just got to ask yourself, how much risk are you opening yourself up to by removing all that friction? But at the same time, how much friction are you willing to accept so that it doesn't become overly annoying? The reason I'm saying that is because allow listing can become a bit of a friction point for some people. So it only takes quite a person with a low amount of risk tolerance to want to do things like that. But at the same time, in the corporate world, listing absolutely is a thing for everything. So basically, standard build for a lot of machines that the big corporates dish out will only let trusted apps and trusted sites run or be accessed. Everything else is just blocked.
Yeah. And it's similar to schools as well in the same instance as well. Yeah. And especially if you've got a young family and they're online, but you want to limit the sites that they go to, for content that is not suitable for them, but it also is used for security measures as well. I think having that functionality warrants maybe a bit of inconvenience. It's like you get home, right? You got to open the door. You got to put your key in the door. And that's a slight inconvenience, right? But it's the security of your house. And just like when you close the door, you lock it in the same, lock your gates, lock your front gate, those sort of things.
Yeah.
I think the more prudent individual online is probably going to be happy with those measures being undertaken. Like two-factor authenticator, that is slightly inconvenienced. I know I get a little bit shitty sometimes using some websites. You have to put it in every single time. And I'm just like, it's just one of those things that's now second nature. It's just like, oh, hang on, I just got to put this in. And it's for the better.
That's right. And just on the home security aspect, a lot of the routers nowadays have the ability for you to do these kinds of things, that you can separate certain devices as being a child device. Mine does. So my home router knows which device my kid uses and which devices we use. And then there are certain things that you can block off certain sites if you want. I think this kind of functionality is becoming a lot more accessible nowadays. It's just down to, do you want to enable these things?
Yeah. Absolutely. So protecting ourselves offline. So obviously talking about a lot of the things that we can do online, is there anything that we can do offline to protect ourselves? Is there any particular precautionary measures that can be taken? Like I've seen where, your pictures or articles and things where people put blue tack over their cameras on their laptops or plug in earphones like the AUX cable, but it's cut and they put that into the socket. So then there's no way that audio can be picked up. Is there any particular preventatives that we can incorporate to prevent these things from happening offline?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, especially when you're out and about or you're on public transport or planes and you're on your laptop. I think one of the things a lot of people don't realize is that you'll open your laptop, and I've seen this actually. If you're on a plane and you open your laptop, you're doing some work, you can do things like put privacy screens on your laptop so that nobody besides you can see it. Because if you're not going to have that, then don't open anything sensitive on your machine. I was on a plane once and I didn't do it on purpose, but I could see the person diagonally across me's screen. They were a very high-ranking executive for a very large multinational. And
you only found that out by looking at their screen.
I saw the screen and I tell, and they were actually doing the redundancy list. So if you're going to do that,
wow,
on the plane, but if you must do it on the plane, then make sure nobody else can see it.
Wow.
Simple to that. The webcam thing is also useful. I think if you don't trust your webcam, you can't put a webcam cover on it. The other thing I do is if you don't like shred physical documents that have your personal information on it is something that I do. You're already covering your.
It's Friday.
I'm not advocating that you should go and buy shredders, but one thing maniacally do is that you get letters and you got your sometimes you got your phone number on certain documents or certain things that if you throw it in, you're like, no one's going to see that. You never know, right? I very often will just tear those things up and make sure that if you want to go and get my information from my physical documents, you have to sit there for hours piecing it together. Simple things like that. You should just do that.
It's like some houses on streets, they might have like roller shutters on, but it's not going to stop someone from breaking and entering into the property, but it's going to make it damn difficult to the point where it's probably not feasible. They'll just go next door to their house that's maybe less secure. So instead of targeting Ian and his documents that have been shredded, and it's going to take 100 hours to do so, they'll just move on to the next victim who hasn't done that.
Yeah, there's a common joke that we have in the cyber world where we talk about, okay, if a friend and I are talking to your friend, right? You say to your friend, if you and I are running from a bear in the woods, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just outrun you.
Yeah, that's very true. It's a bit grim dark, but that's very true.
Don't be the simple target.
Yeah. Make things as difficult as possible for these attackers. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, cool. All right, so some tax remedies for the unfortunate instance where you've had cryptocurrency stolen. This also applies to if cryptocurrency has become lost as well. It's unfortunate, obviously, and it's all too frequent, but it's important to know that the ATO does prescribe that a capital loss can be claimed in these instances, so long as we can keep and provide evidence proving our ownership, which will go through in the next slides. But it's also very important to note that the ATO continues to advise that cryptocurrency is an area of focus And the ATO has explicitly stated that they do need this particular evidence in order to claim a capital loss for any cryptocurrency that's been stolen or lost. So we need to be able to support the claim in order to claim the deduction, right? So there is an evidence requirement imposed, and there can be penalties imposed if it is found that you cannot substantiate the claim. It includes denying the capital loss, so denying that particular deduction against offset against your capital gains or from being carried forward. There may be general interest charges. There may be other fees and penalties made for claims that are done negligently. It's also important to note that where cryptocurrency has become lost or stolen, it can also, the instances that has led to that may be unique. So it's important to assess it on a case-by-case basis as opposed to having a blanket approach. So as the evidence that's required may be different for each situation, it's always important just to have a quick chat to a professional and identify exactly what is required for a legitimate claim. You don't want to be in the unfortunate situation of losing your crypto or having it lost and then claiming the capital loss only to be reviewed or audited and then denied that loss. Keeping very accurate records pertaining to your affairs is absolutely paramount. So list of things that we need to look at in order to prove ownership. So if it's a particular wallet, we need to make sure that the date that we had acquired the key or opened the wallet, the date that it was lost, the address for the wallet, the cost to acquire the crypto assets in the wallet. If the wallet itself is breached, obviously all the assets contained in there would be breached as well at the point of the time that's become lost and or stolen. The value of the crypto assets in the wallet as well at the time it had become lost or stolen. So this might be very difficult, the value of crypto assets, but if you're using a coin tracking software, then it should be pretty straightforward to substantiate what was held at what point and at what value at the point of the event. So again, having good, clear records to substantiate this, backing up the data by using a reputable coin tracking software definitely helps in substantiating these claims. The other things as well is proving that the digital wallet was in your control. So pretty much that usage can substantiate control. Also, if you're creating a digital wallet, you don't need to KYC yourself. So it's always advisable to keep records of what wallets and exchanges are being used, how they're being used, and at what date that you started using them as well. For hardware wallets, again, that was actually in your possession. You might have an invoice addressed to your particular name. It's probably the most practical way. Some well-known businesses that make hardware wallets, being able to substantiate that should be relatively straightforward, but if you're stuck, let us know. Transactions from a digital currency exchange where you have a verified account or linked to your identity. So this is where you've obviously created a centralized exchange account. You've gone through the KYC checks. We can actually look at deposits into that exchange, transfers from that exchange to a wallet which is being used, and then maybe trading, investing activities and other activities being conducted on that wallet as well. We can see where the assets are going, and that can also help to substantiate the fact that you actually own either the exchange and or the wallet. Oops, sorry, I've got a few other things here as well that I want to touch on before we get to any questions. It's very important to assist in satisfying these requirements to extract full history transaction reports and data files. So if in the unlikely event that an exchange was to go bust or you're not able to access your records on an exchange, if you are periodically doing this and extracting your data, then you're never going to be in a position where you would need to on the spot substantiate what assets are held on the exchange, especially like you might be able to, your API keys work, etc., and use that with a coin tracking software. But if that API key fails, then we have to use actual data files. And if you don't have those, it's going to be very difficult to claim cryptocurrency that's been lost or stolen on an exchange that you can't actually access the records. So the prudent thing to do, and it's heavily advisable, recommended to do this, is actually just periodically take the transaction history. You can do it monthly, you can do it every quarterly. There's many different ways to do it. Also, taking a screenshot of your holdings as well is another good way to confirm that you actually hold those particular assets. Also, keeping notes for dates and times of your holdings on any particular exchange or wallet. So having An Excel file listing all the exchanges and wallets that you use is very handy. What they're being used for, ownership percentages, if you hold it with a spouse or a sibling, or if it's 100% controlled and owned by yourself, it's very prudent to have that record, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to substantiate everything. And that's likely why the ATO has imposed so many different dot points of things necessary to prove ownership. Also, if you were the unfortunate customer of an exchange and it's gone upside down, these exchanges sometimes go into liquidation. So you might receive emails from administrators and things like that. So saving those emails down can prove that you were an affected customer in some sort of capacity. Screenshots of websites or articles confirming that activity, potentially a exchange or a particular project has been identified as a scam. Saving those things down can definitely help substantiate a claim that you have been subject to theft or a scam where your cryptocurrency is basically being stolen. Like I said, it can be a bit tricky. It really does depend on a case-per-case basis. So if you're not sure, please reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to assist. All right, that's pretty much wraps everything up. Do we have any comments or areas of discussion from the audience? Let me have a look. All right, if there's nothing from our audience, we'll leave it at that. And some of the ways that you can reach us by email, you can schedule appointments on our website, visiting our Calendly link. You can also give us a call. You can check out our socials as well for recent publications, news from us. We try to deliver as much relevant content as possible. We like to do it to our socials. It's not bombarding with emails, but yeah. So if you have any queries with regards to your affairs, income tax, commercial, cash flow or otherwise, please let us know. And Ian, your contact us page.
Yes, website, that email works. We're on socials. And then if you can also get to me personally, if you want, it's just ian@avertro.com.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks everyone for listening back to this recording. And thank you, Ian, as well, for assisting me today and providing us insights into cybersecurity and what we can do to protect ourselves online. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, mate. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.